Welcome to Anatomy and Physiology 1. This is going to be our intro to the course. So first off, what is anatomy? Anatomy is going to be structure. What is it that you are looking at? Not what does it do, just literally what is it. So right now I'm looking at my left hand, and on it I see a thumb, I see my first, second, third, and fourth digits. So it's literally going to be structures that you are looking at. Within anatomy, there's going to be numerous divisions or subdivisions. There's going to be gross anatomy. That's stuff that you can see with the naked eye. There's going to be microscopic anatomy. These will be things like cells or smaller structures that you're going to need a microscope to observe. And the final is going to be developmental anatomy. The progression of the egg from fertilization until you've reached full maturity. With anatomy, 90% of all anatomy is going to match the textbook. For example, we all have 2 ears, we have a nose, we have 2 eyes, 1 mouth, 10 fingers, 10 toes. So basically it's just when you go from one thing to the next, it's all going to be the same from textbook to real life. Smaller things, they can be missing, such as muscles. Sometimes you can have small muscles that aren't present, or sometimes with stuff like blood vessels or nerves, they can take alternate routes, and they might not be in the exact location that you're always used to. So if anatomy is structure, then physiology is going to be function. And function is always based off of the structure. So with our anatomy and physiology, we're going to have subdivisions. They can be based on your organ systems, like your kidneys, or your cardiovascular system, or your digestive system. All right, stuff like that. We can subdivide these into different organ systems. Within the physiology, we're going to have different tools. You're going to have to be able to look at many different levels of anatomy. For example, if you're looking at the system as a whole, that's going to be macroscopic anatomy or gross anatomy. As you start looking at smaller parts of it, you get down to the cellular part of it or molecular part of it, that's going to be more microscopic anatomy. We'll have our basic physics or physical principles like electrical currents, pressures, movements. We'll be talking about these as we get into different units. And we'll be talking about basic chemical principles. And this is just, you need to know some physical sciences, chemistry and physics. They're going to interrelate with our anatomy and physiology. All right, anatomy, physiology, they're two completely different things, but they are completely inseparable. For example, like I said before, function always reflects structure. Now, would it make sense that bones are hard, rigid objects? They are good for protection and giving you structure, right? They keep you upright. That's the function of your bone. Muscle is tissue that can contract and shorten. Now, would that seem like that is a good protective tissue, or is that something good to help you move? Cardiovascular system, so you have your blood pumping and moving throughout the body. That's going to help connect different systems and carry stuff from one area of the body to the next area of the body. So that can be some sort of like transport system. So it's got a nice liquid base. It has the heart acting as a pump, so the structure is going to follow the function. Like we said, it's going to be the liquid, your blood, traveling through your veins and arteries. Okay, we're going to talk about some positioning, orientation, and directional terms. So here's our terms we have right here. First one is going to be superior, so that's going to be headward. So it could be called superior, cranial, or cephalad. Cephalad just means headward. You can go inferior or caudal, or caudad is another term for it. That means you are going towards the floor, or going inferiorly, you're going towards the feet. And the reason why we like to use these terms cranial and caudad, or cephalad and caudad, is that if you're on your back and you're going up and down, you're not thinking like towards the ceiling, you're thinking you're moving headwards or footward. Next terms we're going to have is going to be medial. Medial means you're moving towards midline. So when I think medial, I think middle. And then we have lateral. Lateral means you're moving away from midline. And then you have intermediate. That is structures that are medial and they are not lateral. They are in between midline and the most lateral aspect. We have dorsal and ventral. Another term for these is anterior and posterior. I don't always particularly like the terms anterior and posterior because of your arms, and when you're in anatomical neutral versus many people's resting states, that position can change. Ask me about this in lab if you have questions. I will probably be bringing this up and speaking about it in lab. First off, ventral will be the front side of your body. So that would be like your abdomen, your face, the fronts of your legs, the fronts of your arms, stuff like that. Dorsal, I always think dorsal fin of the fish is going to be your back. So ventral is chest and abdomen. Ventral is chest and abdomen. Dorsal is going to be your back. All right, next ones are proximal and distal. Proximal is going to be headward or towards midline, and distal is going to be further away. Distal, I think the word distance. Superficial, that's going to be the stuff more towards the body's surface. And deep or internal means the stuff that's going to be deeper within the body, closer to the bone. Okay, so we have some regional terms or divisions of our body. There's going to be the axial and the appendicular. We will have these same breakups actually for the skeleton. You'll have axial skeleton and appendicular skeleton. With your body as a whole, the head, neck, and trunk will make up your axial division, and your limbs will be your appendicular division, or your appendages is another name for your limbs. So just looking here, let's talk a little bit about some body regions. I'm looking at these major bolded points. So cephalic region would be like your head. Okay, cervical region is your neck. Your thoracic region is your chest. Abdominal region is this purple area. Pelvic region. You'll have your back or dorsal region. All right. Well, you'll have your pubic region, your lower limb, your pedal region. So these are just very basic. I want you to be comfortable with those terms, so if I'm referring to something. Okay, next one is body planes. So we're going to have our three planes. Your frontal plane, also known as your coronal plane. This separates you from front to back. So frontal plane separates front and back. Median plane, or sagittal plane, will separate left to right. And your transverse plane separates superior from inferior, or cephalad from caudad. Now within our divisions, we're going to have different cavities. We'll have our dorsal cavity and our ventral cavity. Your dorsal cavity is going to house your nervous system. It will include your brain and your spinal cord. Okay, so that will have two cavities within it. Cranial cavity, vertebral cavity. Let's look at the next slide. This is your dorsal cavity, you remember. Dorsal is posterior, dorsal fin, the back fin of a fish. So here's your cranial cavity or cranial vault. And then there's your vertebral cavity. Your vertebral cavity will house your spinal cord. Cranial cavity will house your brain. Your next cavity is going to be your ventral cavity, and that's going to be split up into two major regions. Thoracic cavity, which is your chest, and abdominal pelvic cavity, which is your abdomen and pelvis. The thoracic cavity is going to have a number of different areas going on it. So you'll have two pleural cavities, one for each lung, and then you'll have your mediastinum, which will include your pericardial cavity, which you find your heart within, and then all the other structures moving through the medial portion of your chest. With the abdominal cavity, abdominal pelvic cavity is if it's grouped together as one. We have our abdominal cavity here, which is mainly your digestive organs. And then we have your pelvic cavity, which is going to be your bladder, your reproductive organs, and the rectum. So once again, this general area is the ventral body cavity. This general area is the dorsal body cavity. Okay, so just going through a little bit deeper now. Your thoracic cavity is going to have two pleural cavities. Each pleural cavity will contain your lungs. So you'll have a right pleural cavity, left pleural cavity. In between those two pleural cavities, you have your mediastinum. So let's look back at this picture again. Right pleural cavity, left pleural cavity, and separating them is going to be your pericardial cavity and your mediastinum. Pericardial cavity is found within the mediastinum. Inferior to your thoracic cavity, you have your abdominal pelvic cavity. And like we said, that's split up into two divisions. Abdominal cavity, that's going to be most of your digestive organs, and your pelvic cavity, which will be your bladder, the rectum, and reproductive organs. So, back here we talked about the pleural cavities, and we talked about the pericardial cavities. The pleural cavities and pericardial cavities are going to be lined by serous membranes. Your abdominal cavity will also be lined by a serous membrane, your peritoneum. So a serous membrane is going to be a thin double-layered membrane separated by serous fluid. So check out this balloon right here. If I were to take my hand and push my fist into this balloon right here, what happens is I'm going to have a layer of balloon around my hand and an outer layer of balloon making the outer wall of the balloon. Alright, so this is one layer of balloon folded over itself and then separated by air. The air would represent your serous cavity, and it would be filled with fluid. Now we have two layers of the membrane here. We have the layer on the surface of my fist, and we have the outer layer. So we would find these on my lungs, my heart, and all my abdominal organs. This inner layer is called the visceral layer. Viscera means organ. So visceral layer would be on the organ of the heart, or the visceral layer would be on the organ of the lung, or the visceral layer would be on the organs of the abdomen. The outer layer, we call that the parietal layer. So that would enclose the cavity. So for example, in the lungs, we call these pleura. Around the heart is called pericardium. So when we have our parietal pleura, I'm going back a couple slides here. When we have our parietal pleura, it's going to be outlining this cavity. The visceral pleura will be on the surface of the lung. Visceral is organ. Separating those two cavities will be the serous fluid, or the pleural fluid. Here's our heart. So the pericardium is going to be wrapped around the heart. There will be a parietal layer and there will be a visceral layer. The visceral layer is on the surface of the heart. The pericardial layer outlines the pericardial cavity. Okay, and then the last one, peritoneum. So you have your visceral peritoneum, which is found on all your abdominal organs, and you have your parietal peritoneum, which is going to enclose the abdominal cavity. So here are three types of serosa, or serous membranes. Pericardium, around the heart, there's visceral and parietal. Visceral is on the surface of the heart. Pleura, right here, is around the lungs. Visceral layer is on the surface of the lungs. The parietal pleura will be found enclosing the cavity. And finally, the peritoneum. Visceral layer is on the organs themselves. Parietal layer encloses the abdominal cavity. Within your abdomen, it's broken up into 9 different regions. Why? When somebody comes in and they say their belly hurts or their abdomen is aching them, it's helpful to know, is it a specific region or is it diffuse all over? If you have a specific region, then we can narrow it down, if you're looking at this picture here, to a specific organ or portion of an organ. So let's start off with the middle, umbilical region, umbilical cord, belly button. So that's where they come up with that. When you go right of that, this is your lumbar area. So you get your right lumbar region, left lumbar region. Above this is called epigastric, so above the gastric. All right. So that's going to be your mid region there. And then you're going to have right and left hypochondriac. Hypo is below, epi is above. Hypo is below, chondriac, they're talking about your diaphragm. So this is the right side below your diaphragm. This is the left side below your diaphragm. We call this the hypogastric, so it's below the stomach or gastric region. Another name for this is the pubic region. And then we have our right and left iliac regions. Why? Your iliac bone's right here. So you get your right iliac region, left iliac region. Like I said, it's nice to have this broken up into 9 different portions because you're going to be finding different organs and different pieces of organs by each region. So if somebody comes in and they say, I hurt here, if you're taking a note, you can have a more specific area of where the person is hurting. Okay, other smaller body cavities. These will be like oral and digestive cavities, your nasal cavity behind your nose, the orbital cavities where your eyes are, your middle ear cavities, and then your synovial cavities. These are going to be joint spaces between bones. Next part here, we have levels of structure. So we talked about anatomy as structures. What is stuff built off of? These are your building blocks. The smallest building blocks there are atoms. Individual atoms are going to be the smallest divisible thing before a chemical will lose its physical characteristics. If we take a bunch of atoms and put them together, we can have a molecule. For example, water is a molecule. H2O, 2 hydrogens, 1 oxygen. So 1 hydrogen would be an atom. The 2 hydrogens and an oxygen together, those form a molecule. Those would be our chemical levels. Next level is if we take a bunch of molecules or macromolecules, which are very, very large molecules, and put them together, we can form an organelle. Organ is in organ, L is in little. It's a little organ. An organelle is going to be one of the functional units within a cell. So our next step is we take a bunch of organelles, we put them within a cell. Now we have the smallest structure that can actually be living. So we'll have our functional unit here. If we take a bunch of cells and we put them together, they form a tissue. So this could be something with a specific function. Here we have smooth muscle, and smooth muscle will be finding lining many cavities, and we'll be finding lining like our whole cardiovascular system is going to be lined with smooth muscle. Our digestive tract will have lots of smooth muscle. It's going to help move stuff through our body. When we take a bunch of different tissues and put them together, we can make an organ. So here we have epithelial tissue, which is a thin covering tissue. We have smooth muscle tissue. Right? We have connective tissue on the outside. So we have 3 different types of tissues here, and these make up an organ. So this could be like a blood vessel. When we take a bunch of organs and put them together, veins, arteries, my heart, all of a sudden we have an organ system. So that could be like my cardiovascular system. We have my veins, we have my arteries, we have the heart. So these are a bunch of different organs together. And then when you take a bunch of organ systems and put them together, now we have the organismal level. So you have like a human being. You have your digestive tract, you have your respiratory tract, you have your cardiovascular system, you have your lymphatic system, you have your nervous system, you have your skeletal system. So we have all these, we have your muscular system. We have all these systems working together to keep you functioning. So what are our different organ systems? First one, your integumentary system. This is basically your coverings. This is your skin, your hair, and your nails. It is there to separate you from the outside world and protect you from dangers of the outside world, basically. Next one is your skeletal system. Skeletal system is going to be there to give you protection and to give you structure, to keep you upright. All right. A big function of the skeletal system that a lot of people will look past is its mineral storage, and it is going to make blood cells. Next one is muscular system. So muscular system is going to allow you to move around and produce heat. And your nervous system. Your nervous system is going to be a fast-acting control system, and it's going to help your body respond to external stimuli. Your nervous system and your endocrine system, so here's our nervous system, your brain and your spinal cord, and your endocrine system, these guys are going to work together to regulate all other organ systems. So they're going to work together to keep those guys working properly and working well together. Your endocrine system will be your pituitary gland, your thymus, your adrenal glands, your pancreas, and for women, ovaries, and men, testes. You're going to have your glands secreting hormones that are going to regulate processes. Your endocrine system will give you longer lasting effects. Your nervous system will give you shorter lasting effects. Nervous system, boom, instantaneous. You get a fast acting control system that does it, boom, immediately when you need it. endocrine system, it takes a little bit longer for it to respond, but its actions will be longer lasting. So if I go and I make a loud noise, that might, in class, I'd whack the meter stick against the board, and people usually jump up, and I kind of chuckle because everybody's heart rate goes up. They all look up like, what did he do? Why is he mad? And what is the point? That was a perfect example of your nervous system. It got your heart rate increased. It gets you going. You're looking at me. Within 5 or 10 seconds, your heart rate decreases and you start to calm down. Your endocrine system now, an example of response from that would be, think about the person that cuts you off on the highway. You get angry, you get agitated, and your heart rate gets up, and you're all angry, you're all mad because now they're slowing down and you can't pass them, and you're agitated, you're mad about it. Your heart rate stays up for a couple minutes, you're irate, and these effects are a little bit longer lasting. That would be a better example of like your endocrine system giving a longer lasting type of response. And if you want to give like an even longer, better example, you could be talking about your hormonal cycles when it comes to the female cycle with menstruation and stuff like that. That's not until next semester though. Next one is your cardiovascular system. It's going to be transporting your blood, and carried through your blood is going to be a whole bunch of stuff. It's going to be carrying oxygen, carbon dioxide, all kinds of nutrients. It's going to have wastes, and you're going to have your heart as your main pump carrying all that stuff along. Why is it important that the cardiovascular system is carrying oxygen and carbon dioxide? All your tissues need oxygen to live, and they all make carbon dioxide as waste product. So blood comes in, delivers the oxygen, picks up the carbon dioxide, moves on its way, goes to the lungs, dumps off the carbon dioxide, picks up the oxygen, works its way back out to the other tissues. Okay, next one is your lymphatic system. Your lymphatic system is going to be working with your immune system, and it's going to be around to be picking up extra fluid lost from blood vessels and returning it to the blood. Your respiratory system is going to keep a constant supply of oxygen so your blood can come pick it up, and it's going to constantly be dumping off carbon dioxide, so when your blood dumps off the carbon dioxide, it's not building up in your body. Your digestive system. So this is going to make it so you can break down and absorb foods, and you can use those building blocks to make energy or build whatever your body needs to build. Urinary system. This is once again going to be helping cleaning your blood. This is going to regulate the pH, and it's going to regulate the amount of waste in water within your blood. Your pH is going to be how acidic or basic your blood is. Right, and then last one, reproductive tracts or system. Most important thing with reproductive system is there to reproduce. And for females, you're going to have the mammary glands. So once you reproduce, then you can help the baby grow. So it's going to be there to help with growth of the newborn baby. Okay, so organ systems. They all interrelate. If one goes, you're in big trouble. For example, if you have a heart attack, what's the bad thing if you have a heart attack? Your heart stops working. Well, why does that matter? All of a sudden, your blood stops pumping. Well, if your blood's not pumping, what's not going to happen? Well, you're not picking up carbon dioxide from you're not picking up the carbon dioxide waste from your cells and bringing oxygen to them. So carbon dioxide levels will build in the blood. You're not bringing blood to your kidneys to get filtered, so your pH is going to get all out of whack. You're not removing all the waste product from it. You're going to your digestive tract. You're not picking up new sugars and building blocks to help maintain energy levels in your body. So if one of these things go, or one part of these things go, is very, very bad. So we need them all working, and we all need them working properly. Okay, so necessary life functions. These are just the things you need to be considered alive. First is maintaining boundaries between an internal and external environment. You're going to notice as I go through these, the smallest thing that has all these, the smallest thing that's going to have all these is a cell. But at the same time, you're going to notice that all these are going to be related to at least one organ system, if not more. So first one, maintaining boundaries between internal and external environments. Well, this one's pretty simple, right? You remember our integumentary system, your skin. separates you from the outside world. On a cell, that would be like its cell membrane. Next one is movement or contractility. So this would be like your muscle. Next one would be responsiveness, which means you are going to respond to some sort of stimuli. So this could be your endocrine system or your nervous system, more likely nervous system. Next one is digestion. So all your cells are going to be taking in glucose and other products and breaking it down to make energy. Metabolism, that's going to be all the chemical reactions that happen in the body cells. So that's all the chemical reactions, the sum total of all chemical reactions occurring in the body, actually. Excretion, that means you're going to be removing waste from metabolism. Reproduction, so your cells divide or you make a baby. And then growth. When you were first conceived, you were just one cell. And now you grew up in your trillions of cells. So, cells divided, you grew. That's the gist of that one. Okay, now these are necessary life functions. So in order to be considered living, these are what you need. This is what you need to be alive. So if you are missing any of these for an extended period of time, you will die, basically. First one, nutrients. I think we all know we need to eat to live. Oxygen. Once again, we all need to breathe to live. If you don't breathe, you're going to die. Water. You need to be hydrated. If you don't have water, you will die sooner or later. Normal body temperature. Average person's body temperature is 98.6 degrees. You can be a little warmer, a little colder. It's not a big deal. But if you get too far out of whack, you can have some very large issues arising. Now, the last one's appropriate atmospheric pressure. I just like to say pressure in general. And the easiest, best example for pressure is going to be blood pressure. As my heart contracts, it builds up the pressure within the heart, which pushes within the blood inside the heart, which pushes the blood out of the heart. That pressure forces the blood to move through my cardiovascular system and work its way back. If I don't have any pressure, all of a sudden my blood's not moving. It's like if I take a bottle and I just set it down on the table. Water's not going to move. If I take that bottle and I squeeze it, all of a sudden water's going to shoot out of it, right? So I built the pressure inside of the bottle by squeezing it. The reason why I say appropriate atmospheric pressure here is because this is going to be necessary for you to breathe. And we'll talk more about this in AMP2 when we're talking about the respiratory system. So this brings us to homeostasis. This is going to be maintenance of a relatively stable internal environment. The way this is formed is through a negative feedback system. And we'll be talking about negative feedback systems in a slide or two here. Another way to state this is it is a state of dynamic equilibrium. So homeostasis is the maintenance of a stable internal environment. The way it's going to be stabilized or maintained is by using a control system. There will be three parts to it. There will be a receptor, a control center, and an effector. So let's think about this with like your house and your thermostat. You have your thermostat, okay, that'll be a receptor or a sensor. It'll have a thermometer on it to gauge what the temperature is in your house. Within that thermostat, there's going to be a little computer. It'll be set at a certain temperature. So let's say our house is set at 70 degrees and it's cold outside. And then there'll be an effector. So this could be your heater or air conditioner. I said it's cold out and we have our house set at 70 degrees. So my thermostat set at 70 degrees. It is sensing what temperature is in the house. It's cold outside, so maybe the temperature in my house dips to 69 degrees. What happens? The control center, the computer of the thermostat, tells the furnace to kick on. The furnace kicks on. It starts blowing out hot air. Temperature in the house rises. My receptor, the thermometer on my thermostat, senses that the temperature in the house has risen. So the control center takes that information and tells the effector, the furnace, to shut off. Now what happens? Temperature in the house starts to decrease again. We sense that the temperature decreased. Control center says, furnace, kick back on. We warm it up. We warm it up until it's nice and above 70 degrees. And then we sense that. We see that it's happened, so we tell it to shut off again. What I just described to you was a negative feedback mechanism. That's right here on this next slide. So how does it work? One, you have a stimulus that is going to change the variable. So what is that? It's cold outside. That's going to make the temperature in the house drop. Two, the receptor detects change. So my thermometer within the thermostat detected that the temperature has dropped. Three, input. So we send that information to the computer in the thermostat. That tells that computer makes a decision and it puts out information. It tells the furnace to turn on. The response, the furnace turns on. It produces heat. It warms up the house. Once the house is warm enough, we start this whole process again. The stimulus is the house is now it's too hot. So the thermostat detects the change. It's warm in here. We input the information to the control center. Control center says, okay, it's warm. Output, turn off the furnace. Furnace turns off. Now the house starts to get cold again. So that's going to be our typical negative feedback mechanism. Positive feedback. Positive feedback isn't going to occur very often in your body, but the most common examples of positive feedback are the platelet plug formation and enhancement of labor contractions. For the platelet plug formation, I think I have it on the next slide here. Here's the reason why we want to have positive feedback. Basically, you get a cut and you start bleeding. So we're going to release chemicals to have us start the clotting reaction. So we release these chemicals and we start the clotting reaction. Now if we were maintaining homeostasis before this clot formed, we would stop it. Since we're not trying to maintain it in this particular thing, we're going to have a positive feedback loop. As we release some chemicals, more platelets come, those platelets start to stick to each other and they start to release more chemicals and more chemicals and more chemicals. Why? Because we want to form a nice platelet plug. Why? Because we want to stop the bleeding. So this is like an outside situation. This isn't just normal. We're trying to stop the bleeding here. Once we have a nice platelet plug formed, then we go back to our negative feedback mechanism and we just stop the formation of the plug. Okay, homeostatic imbalance. When you are sick or you have some sort of illness, there's usually some sort of disturbance in your homeostasis. Whether it's increased risk of disease, so like let's think of some disturbances of homeostasis. Normal blood pressure, if you have high blood pressure, that's a disturbance of normal homeostasis. If you're diabetic, your glucose levels are too high, that's a disturbance of normal homeostasis. So that just means something is letting your set level be off, or it's letting your normal range go up and down too high. This can allow destructive positive feedback, or it can allow other bad stuff to happen. And that's it. See you in lab.